Hello guys, welcome to this second part of how to create a game asset. In this video, I'm going to show you the entire process of how you can create game asset and export it to your game engine. And in this video, I'm going to cover Unity engine, but you can also apply the same process for the Unreal and Cry engine and other engines as well. And so in this video, I'm not going to explain every single process in depth because the video will be so long, so I can give you a brief example of what you need to do. And now our first step, which is reference. And I have to say, if I want to give myself previous self a tip, and it is always going to be reference, because when I started Blender and Unity, I never have any reference of what I'm working on, and I'm going to explain how important this step is. So this is why I put this step into this list. I know I said this in every single of my video that reference is important, and it is true. Reference gives you an idea and make it even clear. No matter what project you are doing, having a reference is a must. For example, take this sketch I created for one of my videos, and I know it's not the best, but it gave me an idea, and anything which gives you an idea can be a reference. And now our second, which is setup, and this is from where our planning ends, and now this is time for execution. And in setup, we are going to basically get basic idea of what we are working on. So without any wasting time, let's start our next step. So now you got your reference. Now this is time for you to open Blender and proceed to our next step, which is setup. In setup, we basically create a basic version of our scene which we are going to create from our reference, and this is going to help out in the future. And now to our next step. And I know every single person who ever touched a 3D software know about this term, and it is none other than modeling. And I don't need to explain this step because every single person who ever used Blender know about this, and I'm going to explain it even more. Everyone who ever used Blender know about modeling because this is some of the first thing you ever do while learning Blender or any other software. And what modeling basically means is it is just changing and manipulating vertices and faces to resemble an object, and this is like the basic meaning of modeling. But in game asset, you need to model very carefully and optimize your asset as much as you can. So make sure to not create that many polygons if you're working on a low poly or want to run low-end devices. Now your mesh should look like from this to this. And I know I couldn't find any better example from this, but I know you got the point. So now let's move to our next point. Now done with modeling, and now we got our mesh ready, but now we have to give our mesh some details and even paint some landscapes. And to do this, we are going to do the simple thing called sculpting. And now let's get started with it. Okay, So sculpting basically means molding your mesh like a clay using brush. And I have to say, make sure to have enough vertices before you start sculpting your mesh, because otherwise your mesh will be pixelated. So now you are done with sculpting. Now it is time for us to move to our biggest segment of this video, which is shading. And I don't need to explain why, because shading can be one's nightmare, and for me it is not that big of a deal. So now let's get started with the next step, which is shading. So now we got our mesh. Now it is time for us to start giving our mesh some color and textures. But the main catch comes here: we need to shade according to our game. What I mean by this, some games have a different style, so you may need shading differently. For example, sometimes you need your mesh to have a solid color, or a game where you need photorealistic textures on your mesh, and this is where the main problems comes, because sometimes textures may be available very easily, but sometimes you need to customly create them, which takes a lot of time. Now we can move to our next step. So now we do this very important step, which is UV unwrapping, which every game developer need to do. And those who don't know about UV unwrapping later face many problems when they are exporting their assets. Let me tell you about it. And now I am going to tell you about UV unwrapping. Let's get started. UV unwrapping. In simple words, it means telling your software how to project your image texture on a mesh. And the reason we need UV unwrapping is that other engines don't understand blend properties. So the only thing they recognize is UV unwrapping. And most people use mapping in shader tab. Game engines don't understand it, but they recognize UVs. When you export your asset, you also export UVs. Now I explained you why we need UV unwrapping, but now I will tell you how you can do it. First of all, you need to open the UV tab on your Blender and you need to select your mesh, and you can see your texture is not applied correctly. You need to select your mesh and press tab and select all your faces in the texture and UV tab. Okay, so now you need to select your faces, and you can see the vertices are now visible on UV tab. And the thing is, instead of fixing your UVs by hand each and every single faces, instead what you need to do is select all your faces and right click and select UV unwrap faces and go to the smart UV unwrap and increase margin by 1 or 0.1 or 0.2% and hit OK, and Blender will automatically UV unwrap for you. But the problem is, sometimes with smart UV unwrap is most of the time it is not correct, and sometimes you need to do some modifications with the UVs. But this tool comes in handy. By the way, guys, comment down if you want me to create a separate video on UV unwrapping, because this topic needs an entire video of its own. And now let's get back to the topic. For the most of the part, UV unwrapping will be easy for you when you're doing UV unwrapping on simple mesh. When you're working on a more complex mesh with more faces, the things can get really messy. In this case, you want to use some add-ons like UV squares, which help you which increase your efficiency. And I think that's it. We are done with this topic. Now we can move to our next topic. So now that we got UVs correct, now it is time for us to move to our next step, which is texture painting. And sometimes you want to use more than one texture on your mesh, or maybe paint a basic color on your mesh. And to do this, we are going to do a simple thing called texture paint. Let's get started. To do texture painting, first you need to open the texture paint tab, and then on the right hand you need to select the texture you want to paint. On the texture you want, maybe it can be base color or roughness map or any map, or maybe you want to paint a mesh using image texture to use multiple texture on your mesh. Now we are done with texture painting. Now we can move to our next step. But before that, if you're liking this video, please make sure to like and subscribe. And now let's move to our next step. Now it is time for optimizing our asset. Optimizing is some of the most important steps for a game asset, because it will make your workflow way easier when you're working on your game in later stages of development. So starting with the example, and I'm using this gear mesh model for this example, and you can clearly see there are too many unwanted vertices in this mesh. So all we're going to do is decrease the amount of vertices in the mesh using remesh modifier or any modifier you want. And while we are optimizing, we are also going to rename the mesh ID. Also, we are going to rename the material we are using in this mesh. So when we are importing our asset to our engine, we can easily navigate to our materials. So now we can move to our next step. So we got our mesh ready. Now it is time for us to start animating our mesh. And before animating our mesh, we need to do some step before we can animate our mesh. And this step is rigging. And I know if you're a beginner, you don't know what rigging is, but now I'm going to explain it. So let's get started. So rigging basically means deforming your mesh using bones, and I don't think I can get any simple as that. So in rigging, we deform our mesh using bones like a human bone, and I'm not going to explain this step in detail because I'm currently working on a new video on creating a character which can be animated. So make sure to subscribe to this channel so you can get notified when I upload that video. So now back to the topic. So rigging can be easy or can be hard, depends upon the project you are working on. And for example, you can see this example. It is very simple to set up. You don't need that much hour to rig something like this. But when you're working on a complex mesh, it can take hours to rig your mesh, and make sure your mesh is compatible for the constraint, because constraints will completely change how you animate your mesh. Constraints will take your animation to a different level, so make sure your constraint option is available. So here's a tip for you. If you don't want to rig your character from the beginning and you want a preset, Blender have many presets for your project. So make sure you use those presets for your works. Now this step is complete. Now we have our mesh ready. Now it is time for us to start giving our mesh some really cool animation. And this is what this next step is about, and it is animating. Animating is really simple. All you need to do is give it enough time. And now it is time for us to start moving to this step. When I say animation is easy, and I am not wrong, animation is easy, but a lot of people think that animation is difficult. And the reason for this is that they are not doing their animation the right way. And what I mean by saying the right way is they are currently doing their animation this typical and old style way, which blow them by a ton and decrease their quality of animation they are doing. And the solution is pretty simple. Instead of doing this typical way of animations, they can just learn a smart way of doing animations. And there are many resources and many YouTube videos on YouTube explain how they can do their animation the fastest and the smart way, which will increase their quality of animation, and it will be a game changer for those who are trying to do animation. For example, in this clip in the background you can see that I am currently doing the animation the wrong way. And what I mean by saying the animation in the wrong way is that instead of using fast methods of doing the animation, what I mean by saying is, in this clip you can see I'm using bones instead of constraints, which is slowing me down and ruining my quality of animation. And in the future videos you are going to see me doing the animation in a completely different way. So, and that's it for this step. Now we got game ready asset, and before exporting it, I'm going to explain you this extra step, which is about procedural animation and dynamic. And in this next step, I'm going to explain you what you need to do to have procedural animation or dynamic animation. If you want a procedural animation in your game, I suggest to not use Blender for your animation, and the reason is pretty simple. For example, take this clip. I'm trying to do procedural animation and I can't port this particle animation to the engine. And the reason for is that first I need to bake all the frames of this animation and apply this particle effect on the mesh. Then I can export it to the engine, and the animation will not be procedural, it will be baked. And this is the reason I highly suggest using Unity engine and the Unity itself for the procedural animation. Unity has some great tools for the procedural animation which you can use, and you will get some really good result, and you can for your game. And it will be way easier for you to animate in the engine instead of using Blender for it. But there will be, and I know there will be many add-ons and many ways you can do procedural animation in Blender and export it to the engine, and I'm completely fine with that. You can use that, but I still suggest using the Unity engine for it. And in this clip you can see I'm using the hair particle system. If you want something result like this, if you want a result like this, you can use Blender for your anime, for the mesh or animation. Now we got our asset ready. Now we can finally export our asset to the engine, and in this case it is going to be Unity engine, but you can apply the same rule for the other engine as well, and it will work completely fine. And in near future I'm going to upload another video of export a game asset to the Unreal Engine, so stay tuned for that. Now finally we can export our asset to the Unity engine, and this is what exactly I'm going to explain you right now. In this example you can see this, I'm using this mesh right now and it many material on it. So make sure to name every single material before you export it. It will help you on a later stages when you're working on your game. So first what we need to do is select the file option. From there we need to select the export option and then we need to select the FBX option. You can use OBJ also, but FBX is a universal format, so it will be easier. So from there we need to select the selected object option. And what it mean by it, you only export the object which are selected in your scene. And visible object is also a great option if you want to only export the visible object in your scenes. From there all we need to do is select Z forward instead of Z minus forward, because Blender and Unity have a different X orientation. And from there we need to, if you have any modifier applied, so make sure to select this apply transformation option. And if you want to export your texture to the Unity, you can use this copy option for your asset, and also make sure to check the embedded texture option also, but I'm going to explain you this in detail in a later in the video. Now we got our asset into the Unity. All we need to do is drag and drop into the scene and it works just completely fine. And if you want to change anything into the materials, I'm going to explain you in a few minutes. But before that I need to set up few things here and there. Okay, now you can see, now we have to change some. If I want to change some materials or material property, all we need to do is, and if I want to change some material property, all we need to do is go to this option and hit and select the materials option, and then click on the extract material option. What we'll do is it will extract all the materials we created in Blender, and this is why I said to rename all your material names. And here you can see I didn't. So, and now we are going to export this object with animations. And here you can see I set up a simple mesh with a simple animation, and now we're going to export it to the Unity engine. And you can see the animation is running, and we need to do is select all the object which we are going to export, and do the same process as before, going to the export option and select FBX. And now we are going to do the same process over which we done before. and make sure to select the selected object option, and here we're going to do z forward, and we have no, and may follow each step which, and you can do exactly what I'm doing here. It will work just completely fine. And you need to open this and check this. Okay, now we have exported our object into the Unity engine, and here you can see it have all the animation we created in Blender, and I set up a simple, and I set up all the animation in the Unity, and all we need to do is hit the play button. It will work completely fine, and I'm going to show you in a second now. And here you can see the animation is working, and you can put this animation on repeat, or you want to trigger this animation on a button. You can do anything you want. And here's the thing I forgot to tell you before. You need to create NFL strips before exporting your mesh to the Unity, and I'm going to show you in a second how you can create NFL strip. Because if you don't create NFL strip, the different animation is not going to show in the Unity. So what I mean by NFL strip is like, and here you can see in bake animation, you need to check that NFL strip option, and all you need to do is go to the open any window in the Blender, and select the NFL tab, which I will show you, and you need to select the keyframe and create NFL strips, and you need to create different NFL strips for each action. Now you need to understand what you really export when you hit the export button, and these are the data which you really export to the Unity engine, which are mesh, assigned material, UVs, animation, bones, mesh ID. And there's a reason why I am explaining you this. Actually you export more data than this, but these are the main points which you need to focus on. But there's a very big problem here. There's a one thing which is missing, and it is textures. You don't really export any texture when you hit the export button, and I'm going to teach you how you can export texture to the Unity engine. And I categorize every single type of texture you can export, starting with the first one, single textures. If you want to export single texture, this is the really easy to export. All you need to do is locate all the textures files you have and drag and drop them into the Unity folder, and from there you can just go and apply those textures to your material. But I'm going to show you some another way which some people use, but it is not that useful. All you need to do is go to the batch mode, and you need to select the embedded texture and select the copy option, and check the embedded texture option also. What this will do is send it's going to export the base color and the roughness map to the Unity, and this is why I say, and this is why nobody use this option. Instead of, what you can do is just simply drag and drop your texture from the folder, and it will be way easier. And you can see, like, I'm like exporting and extracting and and here you can see I'm extracting material, and when and we got our material. Now I'm going to do a extract texture, and you can see that only base color and a roughness map are exported, and this is why. But in actual Blender file there are more maps which need to be exported, but this function doesn't export it, that other maps as well. And importing your texture like this will give you more flexibility than. So all I'm going to do now is change a few things here and there, and I'm going to give you another reminder of subscribing to this channel. It helped me a lot, and you can comment down if you want me to create a detailed video about exporting to the other engines as well, and I'm going to try my best to create that video fast as possible. And now let's get back to the video. And if you're using multiple textures on your mesh, I'm going to explain you how you can export it to the Unity engine. And if you have a mesh like this which have multiple textures, and there's nothing to worry about. All you need to follow the same process of exporting your mesh to the Unity engine. And here you can see I'm following the same process over and over again. I'm going to extract the materials, and all you need to do is just drag and drop your materials once again into the Unity folder, because remember we export the assigned material also. So all we need to do is just drag and drop and apply all the texture to the material, and it working just completely fine. Now if you want to watch me doing this process all over again, you can watch it. But if you want to skip to the next part, you can just use the timestamp given in the video. Now if you are using custom texture, you don't need to worry about it. You can easily export it. Or if you're using a custom texture like this, where you directly paint on your texture using texture painting tools, you can easily export it by just saving your texture. And now to the second one. If you're using procedural texture, you need to bake your texture first. You need to set up an image texture, and this is where your bake image will save. And here you can see you can set up any resolution you want. And now we are going to do is bake. You can bake many type of maps: roughness map, normal map, and base color map. There are many options which are available. And here you can see I just bake the entire material. Let me just bake the other material as well. And yes, it is going to take some time, and you can use some add-ons. And yes, you can use some add-ons which are available on the internet. I tried many add-ons to bake every single thing at once, but sometimes it don't work. Some add-ons don't work, so this is the reason I am not mentioning any add-ons in this video. But in the future videos, if I find any useful add-ons, I will let you know. And here you can see I baked every single map that I needed, and I imported into the Unity, and here you can see the results. And I know there are many types of textures which I can't mention in this video, and you can let me know in the comments which part I forgot in this video, and I'll make sure to make a video on that later. Now the important part of the video is ended now, and the rest of the entire video will be a time lapse of the project I work on before making this video, and exporting it to the Unity as well. If you like the video, please make sure to hit that subscribe button. It helps me a lot. And Now if you make this far in the video, please make sure to hit that like button and subscribe to this channel. It helped me a lot. And bye.